This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. 2.5 Admins, episode 275. I'm Joe.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Alan.
And here we are again. And before we get started, your customary Clara article plug, Alan, is how to set up highly available ZFS pools using mirroring and iSCSI.
Yeah, if you watched our Proxmox webinar a couple of, month ago now, we talked about being able to build real-time replication in ZFS, and basically that works by using mirroring in ZFS. And so we show how to build a highly available pool using that mechanism.
All right, and another plug for the 12 Days of ZFS webinar with Jim.
Yeah, as we head into Christmas time, figure it'd be nice to do a little Christmas themed thing. So Jim and I will be talking about the 12 days of ZFS and kind of going through tips, tricks, treats, and anything interesting that we can share with people to help them have fun with ZFS over the holidays.
But it's going to be on December 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern.
Yep.
Right, well, links in the show notes as usual. Google is collecting troves of data from downgraded Nest thermostats. So they made it so you couldn't use the app or anything to set the temperature. You had to go up to it and do it manually. But they didn't turn off the data collection and the sending of that data back to Google.
Why on earth would you think that they would? Why would you think that Google would turn off a sensor? It's not really what Google does.
No, it's not really. So we're talking about the collection of not only the manual temperature setting that you've put on it, but also proximity sensor, motion sensor to see if you're in the room walking around. This is really creepy stuff.
Yeah, but the reason it collects it is so that its AI can decide. Most people, when the temperature is this low, decide to turn the thermostat up if they happen to be in the room. But if nobody's in the room, we should count that out and so on. But yes, it is creepy. But, people who bought Nest knew it was going to be creepy. The surprise here is they took away your ability to access the creepiness of it to make it useful, but they still kept their side, which, to Jim's point, of course they did. And so I guess you're throwing it away and buying a new thermostat.
I don't understand why anybody would be surprised. Does it suck? Yes, but this is 2025. If you haven't figured out yet that Google wants all the data, I don't know what to tell you. You should have figured that out by now. And I would even push back a little bit when Alan started telling you, what that data is used for. I think that's going a step too far. Google wants the data. They'll figure out a use for it, but they want it. That's really kind of the way they do business. They want all of the data, and they will figure out a way to monetize that data once they have it. So given that these thermostats were already a source of endless real-world data, it boggles my mind why anybody would think that Google would turn it off. I mean, the crappy thing is that they bricked the actual functionality of the thermostats, but that's old news. We already knew about that. And nobody should have needed to be told that Google would continue sucking up all the data. Because again, they want everything. And this is a company that keeps turning the mic back on my smartphone, no matter how many times I disable it and say, no, I don't want to use the voice assistant. Somehow, every 3 weeks or so, it winds up turned back on again.
Yeah. I think it might be interesting to see the stats on how many people who had one of these that got left out in the end go back to a dumb thermostat versus how many buy a different new smart thermostat.
Yeah, I wonder how many people even are aware that it's collecting data on them. Probably not that many. Most people don't read tech news, do they? And it's not made, the BBC or whatever.
Sure, but it was collecting this data when it worked. That was the point of the device. The fact that you don't get the useful side of it anymore, I'm sure you would, if you use the thermostat via the app, you would know that it doesn't work anymore and maybe be incentivized to do something about it.
Most people probably didn't realize it was ever recording stuff because they didn't read any EULAs or anything like that. They just, installed it. Oh, cool, I can control it with my phone now.
An awful lot of people just never think about that. I mean, I ran into Nest thermostats installed in some fairly large businesses. And, it would just be a situation of, the CTO just thought that stuff was cool. Mm. And, when people just think that stuff is cool, you frequently find that they don't It just doesn't really occur to them to worry about, like, is this functionality local in the thermostat, or is it, baked into a cloud backend somewhere? What does it mean that all this data is going elsewhere? What does it mean that the actual control is coming in from the internet and the actual device on my premises is really just a proxy for this remote agency to manage my environment? Like, those are things that I can't not think about. They're things that an awful lot of people really can't think about. It doesn't occur to them. They don't get the point, even if you try to explain it to them. They're just like, did the temperature change? Well, okay.
Yeah, and if you try and explain to them that they could do it on their LAN with Home Assistant, they're just going to look baffled.
I think an example we saw of this somewhat recently with the Amazon outage, the AWS outage, there was this brand of like smart bed that has like fans and so on in it to control the temperature of your side of the bed and so on. And it turns out that it just completely doesn't work when Amazon was down. Like it couldn't remember local. You couldn't literally just like raise and lower the head of the bed. It was just literally completely disabled. And they've apparently working on adding some kind of offline mode now, but it's kind of beside the point that they designed this entire product where if it can't talk to Amazon, it just doesn't work for its primary purpose.
Design is a strong word, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, it's not called Internet of Shit for nothing, is it?
That it is not.
Going back to Google collecting all the data that it can, it made me think about Google Photos, where they offered you just free uploads of all your photos, and then eventually decided that storing all those photos was not worth their while anymore, and started counting those photos as part of your free allowance of 5 gigabytes, whatever it is.
They didn't eventually decide. That was the plan from day one. We got to stop kidding ourselves. Companies don't decide to start making money eventually. Like, this is a very well understood cycle. You have the attract phase and you have the extract phase. In the attract phase, you offer free services. In the extract phase, once the users have come to depend on those free services, you tell them, all right, now fork over the money. And they do it because you have the leverage because they've already come to depend on it.
I assumed it was a little different in that the reason they wanted your photos was so they could train their AI to recognize people in your photos and so on, and just understand the photos.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean Jim's wrong either. It's like, well, why can't we get all their data and charge them for the pleasure?
Yeah, exactly, I suppose. I mean, at the time that happened, I thought, well, they've obviously trained the AI sufficiently at this point. They don't need masses of data that they're paying for. But yeah, both things can be true at the same time, right?
And the AI access to the Google Photo library, it's a bit concerning. It's smart enough, like it knows what it's looking at. And I don't have any spicy photos that are being backed up to Google Photos. And I frankly wouldn't recommend it because Google knows way the hell too much about what those photos are.
Well, another vote for Image on that score. Host it on your own LAN. Don't worry about it. And it's got reasonable machine learning stuff in it. It's probably not as good as Google Photos, but, it can find a picture of a cat when you want it to.
It's about all I really need.
FreeBSD officially supported in OCI Runtime Specification version 1.3. This seems like a pretty big deal to me, Alan. You are the FreeBSD expert. Please enlighten me. Am I right?
Yeah. So basically, this is the standard body, the Open Container Initiative, setting out the new version of their standard. And as of November 4th, basically means FreeBSD is officially supported as part of the standard. So if your container management tool follows the Open Container Initiative spec, that same management tool will be able to create containers on FreeBSD and manage them using the same tool that you would use on a different platform.
Does this mean Docker on FreeBSD?
It could, yes. If Docker gets to complying with the 1.3 version of the spec that just came out, then yes, it could. Now, whether the tool will actually compile and run is maybe a slightly different thing, but in general, yes, it means that any tool that follows the spec would be able to run on FreeBSD.
So we're talking Kubernetes as well, right?
Entirely possible, yep. That's basically the goal. Like, people have been working on this in FreeBSD for a long time. Biggest contributor, obviously, was Doug Ravison, who did a lot of the work to get things like Podman and a bunch of other stuff to work, and to add the required features to the FreeBSD kernel to meet all the requirements of the OCI runtime.
Yeah, that must have been a lot of work.
It was mostly just seeing what the runtime needed, making sure FreeBSD had it. And then Dave Cuddlehooper, who I worked with on the FreeBSD core team, led the work to make sure that the FreeBSD official OCI images, which started with FreeBSD 14.2, and they've been available on Docker Hub and the GitHub container registry. And then, with this, Doug finished the last of the work to add FreeBSD as a supported platform to the OCI runtime specification. And as of version 1.3 of the OCI, you can actually have FreeBSD images in Docker Hub and the GitHub container registry and use tools that follow the spec like Podman and anything else to actually run containers on FreeBSD.
But you still won't be able to run a Linux container in FreeBSD or a FreeBSD container in Linux, right?
So if it's a Linux container and it doesn't use anything overly esoteric, like I think the default Nginx Docker container uses I think it's a IOU ring or some very Linuxy thing, many images probably will just work using FreeBSD's Linux compatibility. But if the binary inside uses some very specific Linux syscall, then it might not work. But I would say a good chunk of them probably would work, but that's really not the point of the OCI specification, is that you would build containers that are for the OS you meant, same thing. You wouldn't necessarily run a Red Hat styled container on Ubuntu because the versions aren't going to line up and so on. But you probably can run a lot of the Linux containers on FreeBSD, but that's not really the point of this work.
If you think people using Linux containers are being real picky about what source distro a container was built on versus what distro they're running, I don't think you've been paying much attention to how people use containers in the Linux world.
Yeah.
Well, Joe was going on about the AI stuff, and sometimes I feel a little that way about the way people use containers. It's like, instead of having portable software, we've decided that works on my machine, I'll just package up my machine and ship it to you, is the way we'll distribute software now. Or snaps. It's like, we can't make two programs work together, so we'll treat each program as its own whole operating system.
Not quite, but I get what you're saying.
I also find the container world disgustingly sloppy, personally. I don't like the decisions that get made packaging all that stuff. Like, just as a technology, containers are clearly useful, but the way that we as an industry have collectively decided to use them, I don't like it.
Yeah, like in general, I've very much been a fan of containers. Like, I've used FreeBSD jails for 20 years now and found them very useful and very powerful. But at the same time, yes, the way other people have used them occasionally, I've been like, maybe we don't want to just download a giant binary from who knows where and just run it forever without updating it. But that's kind of getting off topic here. The big thing is, with the OCI runtime specification, it means the tools will be able to create FreeBSD containers, and you won't be stuck having to use FreeBSD specific tools. Any tool that's compliant with the spec will be able to manage your FreeBSD containers. And that can make it very much easier to have a hybrid environment where you have, half your infrastructure running FreeBSD and half running Linux, and deploying maybe almost the same container on both, so that if there's a vulnerability in either the application or the operating system, if you have the right mix, you ensure that half your infrastructure isn't running the same thing. And that way, if you have to take half of it down because of a 0-day, you still have the other half to continue running with.
But if it's the exact same container, which it sounds like it might be possible to do that, then that kind of negates some part of that.
Then you're only being protected from the operating system part, yes.
Yeah.
But like, if you're running a DNS server, you could run bind on Linux and unbound on FreeBSD, or whatever combination of two alternative softwares you would want to do. Or, if you're building your web server stack and you use OpenSSL on some and GNU TLS or WolfSSL or whatever on the other ones, so that one vulnerability doesn't affect all of your infrastructure.
Now you're just living in la la land. Nobody's going to do all that. It's going to be 10 different copies of the exact same image. That's the thing. Again, when we look at containers, the features that jump out to me are the security features. But that's not the way people actually use containers. In the real world, the target market for containers is people who think piping curl to bash is just way too secure.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I would agree most people are doing it that way. But I know for a fact that there are companies actually building reliable infrastructure because they don't want to be the next Microsoft, Amazon, Cloudflare outage.
I think that there are definitely people who you've described there, Jim, running it sloppily. But there are also a lot of very big, very serious companies who take this stuff very seriously, and they have the software bill of materials stuff going on and scanning containers and all the rest of it. And they are definitely keeping them as up to date as they possibly can.
Hashtag not all users.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, although I think a lot of them that are doing SBOM and so on are probably making their own containers, not taking a public one and scanning it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because if I make the soup myself, I know what went in the soup.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, making your own infrastructure from scratch and using containers to segment it, that's not what we're talking about here.
Well, it could be. Like the whole point of OCI is that is a thing you can do now with FreeBSD.
No, I just meant that's not what we're talking about in terms of how people are overwhelmingly actually using containers. That's not how people are overwhelmingly using containers. They're using containers as a way to not even have to pipe curl to sudo bash because it's already been piped to sudo bash for you.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Tailscale. Go to tailscale.com/25A. Tailscale is an easy-to-deploy zero-config VPN that allows you to build simple networks across complex infrastructure. Tailscale is built on the rock-solid foundation of WireGuard with a quick and simple setup process. It has an intuitive admin console that makes it easy to see all your connected devices and machines, your access controls, and all your other settings. I've been using Tailscale for years now to connect to off-site backup machines and tunnel back into my LAN when I'm away traveling. Loads of the other Late Night Linux family hosts love using Tailscale too. Whether it's controlling 3D printers, remoting into relative systems for support, or controlling Home Assistant, Tailscale's got us covered. Tailscale's personal plan is free forever. You'll get up to 100 devices and 3 users at no cost with no credit card required. So support the show and try Tailscale for free today at tailscale.com/25A. If you'd like to bring Tailscale to work, use code LATENIGHTLINUX for 3 free months of any paid plan. Thousands of companies have already made the switch. That's code LATENIGHTLINUX. Let's do some free consulting then. But first, just a quick thank you to everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to 2.5admins.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And if you want to send in your questions for Jim and Alan or your feedback, you can email show@2.5admins.com. Joe writes, my interest was piqued when you mentioned the 7th gen Core CPUs that are Windows 11 end of life, which can be had for huge discounts, around the price of a Raspberry Pi. I went looking high and low and couldn't find anything close to the prices you mentioned, definitely not for a Core i5 or i7 7th gen for the price of a Raspberry Pi. And the Best Buy dumpster was full of partially exploded hoverboards but no laptops. Maybe it's the tariffs in the States. Could you elaborate on where you are finding the incredible deals you referred to in these episodes? eBay, ultimately, and Facebook Marketplace. There are some people who are trying to sell you these kind of, 7th gen and older machines for ridiculous money, and you just have to ignore them. They're just dreamers. I had a quick look yesterday, and I found an X270, which is a Lenovo ThinkPad, for about £70 delivered in the UK, which is roughly the same price as an 8GB of RAM Raspberry Pi. So I'm not sure about the secondhand market in the US, but my understanding is it's roughly similar.
Yeah, really what you got to do is find the places that recycle the stuff and are less interested in taking the machine, freshening it up, reinstalling the OS or whatever, and trying to sell it for a profit. And the ones that are just like, we got paid by the company that was getting rid of this to dispose of it. And we've replaced the hard drive or ripped out the hard drive and are just selling it to make even more profit. And they are going to, have these deals where, we have hundreds or thousands of these and we want to get rid of them, rather than we have 10 of these and we want to make money off of them.
Now, it's probably worth mentioning, yes, to get the absolute cheapest possible prices, you've got to go to the absolute cheapest possible places. That means eBay, that means Facebook Marketplace, that means, it used to mean Craigslist. I'm not sure if it even still does mean that one anymore, but regardless, what you're talking about is you're dealing directly with other individual people looking to get rid of some kit. And it's a messy experience. You're not sure what's going to be out there. You're not sure who you're going to have to deal with or how much of a pain they're going to be. Now, with all that said, if you're more interested in a more seamless experience and don't mind spending a little bit more, you can find refurbished X270s on Amazon for like $250.
Yeah, but that is not the price of a Raspberry Pi.
No, it's not. However, there are some people out there who might be quite interested in paying $250 rather reliably just to click and have something show up on their doorstep, as opposed to, jockeying around with their fellow local humans hoping to get it for 50 or 70.
Yeah, true.
It's still flowing me that like my previous laptop that I still use on a regular basis is an X270 and falls exactly in that camp, because that's a 6th gen for an X270. But yeah, like you can reliably get those for $200 from various liquidation places. Back in the day, that's how I ended up with a bunch of X220s, because, they could be had for, $99 to $199 to get a whole computer that would run the OS and be able to do stuff. And they were great as even just my science experiment machines.
I'm looking at i5 10th gen laptops with Windows 11 Pro for $264 on Amazon. So if you just want the easy point and click experience, there you go.
Well, if you want Raspberry Pi kind of money, then you're going to have to go the eBay route or Facebook Marketplace. Or, as Alan said, go to the actual places that recycle them. But this one that I found yesterday is a 7th gen i5 with 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gig SSD, and it's got a slight crack in the body and there's a couple of screws missing. So, it's not high-end, perfect condition, but what do you want for 70 quid? I will quickly plug Linux After Dark because we've done a couple of challenges. On episodes 98, 99, and 103, we did the £50 challenge where we had to find a Linux machine for £50, and then we did the £20 challenge. And if you're willing to work hard, you can get machines that will run Linux for those prices. It's quite surprising. But it is worth mentioning that if you want really, really cheap, then your best bet is to go for a desktop. Like you can get the small form factor desktops, like Esprimo is the Fujitsu one, I think, and Optiplex is the Dell one. And some of those that are not Windows 11 compatible, they are like literally 30, 40, 50 pounds.
If you want to look into, one of the small form factor Dells or HPs that's no longer Windows 11 ready, and you don't want to go trawling through eBay or Marketplace, they do have them for about $150 a piece on Amazon renewed.
Yeah, 5 times the price of spelunking on eBay. How much is your time worth, I guess?
Yeah, but if you want 3 of them and you just want them to work and you want to be able to return them to Amazon if there's a problem and maybe it's worth a little bit more money.
And some people are legitimately not comfortable just trawling Marketplace and like trying to hook up with random people to buy kit. Not everybody is a relatively young, large dude.
Yeah, well, that's why eBay, you've got buyer protections and everything. If they just send you, if they try and scam you, you do have some buyer protections.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay a little bit more, but you're not paying Amazon money. But, if you just want to quickly search, click, get it within a day or two, then yeah, maybe that makes sense. Time versus money, the usual question.
It seems like, Joe, you usually have an eye towards spending the least amount of money for one thing that you want to do one time. I usually have an eye for what can I rely on being able to do whenever I need to do it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I bought 3 of those X220s back in the day because I could get them for $149. And so when I needed another machine or when I knew someone needed a machine to do a science experiment on or just to have an extra machine they could screw around with FreeBSD with, it was, hey, look this model up on eBay and it'll be like $100 and you can get a whole machine.
If you want to buy a small fleet of these things all at once, to set up as, a true home lab cluster scenario, you can buy 10, 15, 20 identical of those Optiplex small form factors.
Yeah. I got a 2nd gen, or it might have been the 3rd gen Optiplex, and I paid £20 for it on eBay because I invested the time looking for it, I suppose. It's just a different mindset that I have. I just have the trying to get a bargain mindset, I suppose.
Well, I also have the trying to get a bargain mindset, but for me, I want to get reliable, repeatable bargains. It's not just a one-off for me.
Yeah.
You know, if I do it once, then I want to be able to do it again. And that's very much not what you get out of the eBay or Facebook marketplace or flea market experience. It's what's there today. What can I do right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, even for myself, it's usually I want to maybe not quite establish a relationship, but I want to have a couple of good recyclers I know about on eBay or wherever and know that I can go there and find what I need. Like, hey, I need more DDR3 RAM for an old server. Hey, that place I bought it from last time. Let's check there first. I've dealt with them before. I know that they ship from inside Canada or wherever I am, and it'll be that much easier to just get a pack of RAM and beef up this server.
Right, well, we'd better get out of here then. Remember, show@2.5admins.com if you want to send any questions or your feedback. You can find me at joelrest.com/mastodon.
You can find me at mercenariesysadmin.com.
And I'm at Alan Jude.
We'll see you next week.